The alien camp sat beside the grey ocean, quiet and broken. The wind carried the smell of salt and rust. The waves hit the sharp rocks again and again, like a slow heartbeat that never stopped. Once the camp had hundreds of soldiers, bright tents and loud laughter. Now there was only hunger and silence. The aliens were weak. Their green skin had turned pale and dry. Their eyes looked hollow. The food stores were empty, and their supply ship had not come for weeks. Even the plants around the camp had stopped growing, poisoned by the strange sea air. Captain Mason, the only human in the camp, stood near the edge of the ocean, watching the waves. His face was calm, but his mind was heavy. He could hear the stomachs of the young alien children growling. They sat in the dirt, trying to sleep their hunger away. The alien commander, Ricktal, walked toward Mason. His voice was low and cold. "You humans said you could survive anywhere," Ricktal said. "Can you survive here without food?" Mason looked at the alien leader and gave a tired smile. "Maybe," he said, "if the sea lets me." The commander frowned. "The sea here is cursed. Everything inside it is poison." "Maybe," Mason said again, "but I've seen oceans like this before. Sometimes they test you first." That night, when the sky turned dark purple and the two moons rose, Mason walked alone toward the water. The other soldiers watched from the shadows. "He's going to die," one whispered. "The sea will eat him alive." Mason didn't listen. He tied a piece of broken metal to a wire, made a hook, and waited by the water. The waves glowed faintly blue, and strange fish moved under the surface, each one shining like liquid light. He caught one. It moved in his hands like a living lantern. The fish hissed, its scales burning his skin, but Mason did not drop it. He carried it to the fire pit, built a small flame, and cooked it carefully. The smell rose into the cold air, warm, sweet, and strange. The aliens covered their faces. "You can't eat that," shouted one of them. "It's forbidden." Mason just shrugged. "Forbidden doesn't fill your stomach," he said softly. Then he took a bite. Everyone waited for him to scream, to fall, to die. But Mason only chewed, smiled, and said, "Tastes like home." Hours passed. He was still alive. The next morning he caught more fish. The alien children watched him silently. Their bellies ached. He cooked again and placed the food near them. "You don't have to eat," he said. "But if you're hungry, try." One small alien girl took a bite first. Her eyes widened. She smiled. Then another child joined, then another. Soon the smell of cooked fish filled the camp, and weak laughter returned. When Ricktal came back from patrol, he froze. "What have you done?" he shouted. "You fed them poison." But Mason pointed at the children, laughing, alive, full of color again. "If it's poison," he said, "then it's a strange kind." It gave them life. The commander had no words. The other aliens began whispering. The human ate the cursed fish and lived. The sea obeys him. That night, while the camp slept, Mason sat alone by the water again. He looked at the horizon, where blue light moved deep under the waves. The ocean glowed brighter when he looked at it, like it was answering his thoughts. A low voice echoed from the dark sea. Not human, not alien, something else. "You have come back," it said softly. "Are you ready to feed them all?" Mason froze. The waves touched his feet like hands. He stared into the glowing water, heart pounding. He didn't speak. The voice faded, but the glow remained, waiting. He whispered to himself, "If that's what it takes, then yes." The ocean rippled once as if smiling, and from that night, the sea near the camp never stopped glowing. The next morning, the ocean looked alive. The blue glow in the water had grown brighter, spreading across the beach like veins of light. The alien camp woke up to the sound of waves and the smell of roasted fish. Captain Mason was already there, standing near his small fire kitchen. A few stones, a pan made from an old ship plate, and sticks for cooking. He was humming softly, something from Earth. The alien children were around him, waiting with empty bowls and wide eyes. "Only one fish each," Mason said, flipping the glowing pieces of meat. "The sea gives enough for all, but we must take only what we need." The young aliens nodded. They trusted him now, the strange human who didn't die after eating from the forbidden sea. But not everyone trusted him. Commander Ricktal stood at the edge of the beach, watching in silence. His second officer, a tall alien with sharp fins, whispered, "He's changing them. They listen to him more than to you." Ricktal's jaw tightened. "Let him play his game," he said. "When he brings death to the camp, they will remember who warned them." Down by the fire, Mason looked at the horizon. "The sea's calmer today," he said quietly. "It's listening." "Listening?" asked one of the alien girls. "Yeah," Mason smiled. "Back home we used to say the ocean talks if you know how to hear it." The children giggled, thinking he was joking. But Mason wasn't. He felt something out there, something vast and patient beneath the waves. As the sun set, strange things began to happen. The fish came closer to shore, glowing brighter, almost waiting for him. The waves moved slower when he stepped into the water. It was as if the ocean recognized him. He caught a few fish easily that night. But when he pulled the net for the last time, it was heavier, much heavier. He dragged it in, breath short, arms shaking. The net hit the sand with a loud splash. Inside was not fish. It was a shape, smooth, black, and pulsing faintly with blue light. The children gasped. "Is it alive?" Mason stepped closer. The thing opened slowly like a flower. Inside it was a pearl the size of his hand, glowing with soft light. He picked it up carefully. The glow spread to his palm, warm and calm. Behind him, the ocean whispered again, the same voice as before. "You take what is offered, but do you know the cost?" Mason froze. "Who are you?" he whispered, but the voice did not answer. Only the waves spoke now, soft and endless. That night, as everyone slept, Mason built a small shelter on the beach. He called it the kitchen. It was nothing but wood and scrap metal, but it had warmth and hope. Every evening, he cooked food for the camp, shared stories, and taught the aliens to season the fish, to use salt and herbs, to cook instead of simply eat. The camp started to change. The sick grew stronger. The children laughed again. Even some soldiers came secretly at night, hiding their pride, asking for a bowl. But not everyone was happy. Ricktal watched from afar, anger growing in his heart. "The human plays with dark things," he said. "He has made a deal with the ocean." The second officer nodded. "Should we stop him?" "Not yet," Ricktal said coldly. "The sea will stop him itself." That same night, while Mason was cleaning his tools, the ocean became silent, completely still. No wind, no sound. Then from the deep, something moved. A shadow. Enormous. It rose slowly, too large to be real. The water boiled around it. Two glowing eyes appeared just under the surface, watching the firelight. The children screamed and ran. Mason stood frozen. The creature's voice filled his head like thunder underwater. "Human," it said. "You touch my children. You feed from my heart." Mason swallowed hard, standing tall. "I feed the hungry," he said. "Not myself." The sea creature's eyes narrowed. Then, suddenly, it sank back into the dark, leaving only the glow of the waves behind. The camp was silent. The children clung to Mason's legs, shaking. He looked down at the glowing pearl still in his hand. "It pulsed once, like a heartbeat," he whispered. "I think the sea just tested me. And I'm still alive." The ocean, far beyond, seemed to answer with one deep wave that crashed against the rocks, not in anger but in warning. The ocean slept quietly that night. The waves rolled like deep breaths, glowing faintly under the twin moons. The campfire near Mason's beach kitchen still burned, its smoke dancing into the dark sky. Everyone else had gone to their tents, whispering about the giant creature that had appeared from the deep. Mason sat alone on a rock, holding the glowing pearl. It pulsed slowly, like it was alive, like it was breathing with him. His reflection shimmered on its smooth surface, his tired eyes staring back. He whispered to himself, "Why did you give me this?" The pearl answered with silence, but then the ocean stirred. A faint blue shimmer moved across the waves, spreading toward him. A familiar voice, soft and strange, filled his mind again. "You feed the weak. You break the rule. The sea remembers kindness, human." Mason's breath caught. "So you are the sea," he said quietly. "Or something inside it." The voice chuckled faintly like waves brushing the sand. "Both. I am the hunger and the gift. Once I fed your world. Now you feed mine." Before he could reply, the water near his feet began to bubble. Shells surfaced, large, shimmering, and filled with crystals that looked like frozen light. The glow painted his face in pale silver. He touched one crystal. It was cold at first, then warm. He broke a small piece and tasted it. Sweet, salty, alive. Food. The sea gives back, the voice said, but never for free. Then it was gone. The glow faded. The waves returned to their rhythm. Mason looked at the pile of shells in awe. Whatever this was, it could save the camp. But the warning echoed in his mind, never for free. At dawn, the aliens woke to shouts of joy. Children ran down to the beach. Look, food. The sea gave food again. Ricktal pushed through the crowd, his eyes narrowing at the sight. Mason stood beside the pile, calm but alert. You see? Mason said. It's not poison. It's a gift. Ricktal stepped closer. You think the ocean gives gifts? Everything here take life. Maybe it takes and gives back, Mason replied. Maybe we just never learned how to ask. Some soldiers murmured in agreement. The crystals shone softly, inviting. Mason cooked one on the fire. The sweet smell filled the air. When he handed it to a small alien child, she ate, smiled, and hugged him. Ricktal turned away in frustration. You are making them forget who they are. Or maybe, Mason said, I'm helping them remember what hope feels like. That evening, Mason taught them how to build stoves from rock and metal, how to boil water, how to share food equally. The camp that once waited for death now worked together, laughing as they cooked. But when night fell again, Mason noticed something new. The ocean's glow had spread farther, not just near the camp, but miles along the coast. Strange lights moved under the water, like creatures made of fire. One of the alien children pointed. Teacher Mason, look, the sea people. He smiled softly. Not people, he said. Friends, maybe. Then he saw something that made his heart stop. In the glow, shapes rising again. Dozens of them, not as large as the first creature, but tall, elegant, and watching. They had eyes like the pearl, blue, alive, aware. They stood just below the surface, silent. The children clung to Mason. Even Ricktal came down, his weapon ready. Mason raised his hand slowly. It's okay, he whispered. They're not here to fight. As he spoke, one of the figures extended its arm. Something floated toward the shore. Another pearl, smaller this time. It landed softly in Mason's hand. The glowing beings bowed their heads, then vanished back into the deep. Ricktal looked shocked. Why would they do that? Mason stared at the pearl, feeling its heartbeat again. Because they trust me, he said softly. Because I trust them. The commander shook his head. No, they gave it to you for a reason you won't like. Mason didn't answer. He looked back at the sea, calm, endless, and full of secrets. The wind carried the sound of the waves like whispers. He whispered back, if there's a price, I'll pay it. Just let them live. Far away, thunder rumbled deep below the water, as if something ancient had heard his promise. And from that night on, the aliens called the human not Captain Mason, but the Tide Speaker. The wind came first, soft at dawn, sharp by noon and screaming by night. Clouds the color of iron rolled over the alien camp. The once peaceful ocean began to twist, turning dark, restless, alive. The aliens ran to secure their tents, shouting over the roar of the coming storm. But Mason didn't move. He stood at the edge of the beach, staring at the black horizon. The sea's angry, said one alien soldier, fear in his eyes. No, Mason whispered. It's hungry. Lightning flashed, slicing the sky open. The camp's lights flickered and died. The ocean howled like a living beast, waves rising higher with every minute. Ricktal approached him, drenched in rain. You've angered it, human. You took too much and now it comes to take us all. Mason shook his head. No, it's not here to destroy. It's here to test us again, the commander spat. You talk as if the sea is a god. Mason's eyes stayed on the horizon. Maybe it is. Maybe gods just look different out here. Another wave crashed, flooding half the camp. The aliens screamed as their shelters tore away. The kitchen fire vanished under the rain. Mason ran to it, grabbing metal scraps and stones, rebuilding the small fire pit with trembling hands. "You're insane," Ricktal shouted. Mason shouted back, "If we hide, we die. If we stand together, maybe it listens." The children followed him, crying but brave. They helped rebuild the fire, shielding it with their small bodies as wind whipped sand into their faces. Mason struck the flint again and again until sparks caught. A tiny flame appeared, fragile but alive. "Feed it," Mason yelled. "Keep it burning." "The ocean needs to see we don't give up." They tossed dry cloth, rope, even pieces of broken armor into the flame. It grew brighter, fighting against the storm. The rain hissed on its edges, but the light refused to die. Then Mason raised his voice against the thunder. "Bring salt. Bring the fish." The aliens hesitated. "You want to cook?" "No." "Yes," Mason roared. "The sea speaks through hunger. We'll answer with food." Ricktal stared at him, half furious, half stunned. But something in Mason's eyes made him obey. Soon, glowing fish were laid across the fire. The smell of cooking spread into the wild wind, mixing with the rain and salt. "Stay close," Mason shouted. "We cook for life, not fear." The waves rose higher, towering over them, walls of living water. But just as the largest wave was about to crash onto the camp, it froze. The entire ocean shimmered blue. The rain slowed. The air went still. Then from within the towering water, glowing eyes appeared again, dozens of them. The sea creatures, the spirits of the deep, were watching. Mason stepped forward, his hair soaked, clothes torn, voice shaking but firm. "We share your food. We keep your light. We feed your children as our own." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the enormous wave bent backward, not falling but bowing. The creatures lowered their glowing heads. The water retreated slowly, flowing back into calm ripples. The storm ended in seconds. The clouds broke apart, revealing the twin moons shining down like watchful eyes. Silence fell across the beach. The fire still burned, warm, steady, bright. Ricktal fell to his knees. "By the stars." "He spoke to it," he whispered. The aliens gathered around Mason, their faces full of awe. The children hugged his legs, laughing through tears. Someone whispered the words again. "The tide speaker." Mason sat down, breathing hard. He looked at the calm ocean and said softly, "You wanted proof we can live together. There it is." The ocean shimmered faintly as if answering him. Small silver fish leapt from the water and landed near the fire, still glowing. Ricktal stared at them. "What now?" Mason smiled tiredly. "Now, we eat." The aliens laughed for the first time in weeks. They roasted the new fish. Their glow lighting the beach like stars fallen to the sand. The storm that should have destroyed them became a feast of survival. A banquet shared between sea and sky. And from that night on, no one in the camp ever feared the ocean again. They only waited for its next gift. 3 weeks after the storm, peace finally touched the alien camp. The sea was calm, glowing softly every night like a living lantern. Children played by the waves, collecting shells, while the adults worked near Mason's beach kitchen, cooking and sharing food without fear. But one morning, the peace shattered. A deep hum rolled through the air, metallic, heavy, unnatural. The sky darkened, not from clouds, but from ships. Enormous alien war cruisers hovered above the horizon, their silver bodies flashing in the sun. The alien flag of the Empire burned bright across their hulls. "They've come," Ricktal whispered, his throat dry. "The High Command." The camp fell silent. The ships descended slowly, landing on the cliffs beyond the beach. Soldiers in shining black armor marched down, their faces hidden behind helmets. Their leader, General Corvan, stepped forward, tall, cold, proud. His armor gleamed with gold stripes of authority. Ricktal saluted, trembling. "General, we thought you were lost to the storm." Corvan's eyes flicked to Mason. "And yet you survived." Curious, Mason stood by his kitchen, quiet, watching. His hands were still blackened from cooking fire, his face calm but firm. The general's gaze turned to the ocean. "You have violated sacred law," he said loudly. "The Sea of Aethra is forbidden. Its creatures are not to be touched. And yet, I smell their flesh cooking in the air," the camp murmured nervously. The soldiers raised their weapons slightly, their armor humming. Mason took a slow breath. "We were starving," he said. "The sea fed us when the Empire forgot us." Corvan turned sharply. Forgot you? You dare accuse the Empire of neglect? Mason didn't flinch. I'm saying we survived because we worked together, not because someone sent help. The general stepped closer, glaring. You are human, yes? A primitive creature from a dying world. You come here, corrupt our people, make them eat from cursed waters and call it survival? The word primitive echoed through the camp like an insult. But the aliens who had lived beside Mason didn't move. They only stared at the general, quiet but unafraid. Then one child, the small girl who always helped Mason cook, stepped forward and held out a glowing fish. He saved us, she said softly. If he didn't fish, we would all be gone. Corvan froze. For a moment his armor lights dimmed, and then he laughed coldly. Sentimental lies. The ocean does not give life, and it takes it. As he spoke, the ground trembled. Everyone turned toward the sea. The water was glowing again, brighter than ever. Waves rose slowly, and within them, shapes began to move. The same ocean spirits that had once bowed to Mason. The soldiers aimed their weapons, shouting. Mason raised his hand. Wait, don't fire! But Corvan ignored him. Open formation, he roared. Purge this place. Mason ran forward, standing between the soldiers and the water. Stop, he yelled. You'll destroy everything. The general's eyes flashed. Move aside, human. No, for a moment they stood face to face, one man, one empire. Lightning flashed behind them, but the ocean stayed calm, as if holding its breath. Then the sea itself answered. A huge wall of glowing water rose behind Mason, forming a shimmering barrier. The soldiers stumbled back, their weapons useless. Within the water, the giant sea creature appeared again, its eyes glowing with deep blue light. The general fell to his knees, trembling. Impossible. Mason turned slightly, voice low but steady. You see? The sea doesn't belong to your empire. It belongs to life, to all of us. The creature's voice filled every mind on the beach. Those who feed life shall be protected. Those who destroy shall drown in their own greed. The soldiers dropped their weapons. The waves lowered gently, touching the sand like a mother's hand. The general looked up at Mason, eyes wide. What are you? Mason sighed softly. Just a man who listened. The ocean shimmered again, then stilled completely. The fleet above the cliffs powered down its engines, silent, humbled. For the first time, the Empire's soldiers bowed, not to their general, but to the human standing barefoot on the glowing sand. Ricktal stepped beside Mason and whispered, The sea has chosen you, Tide Speaker. The question is, what will you ask of it next? Mason looked at the horizon where sunlight met water. Peace, he said quietly. Just peace. The ocean rippled once, in agreement. The next dawn arrived calm and bright, but the air was heavy with silence. The fleet of the alien empire still hovered above the cliffs, waiting. Below, the camp stood between fear and faith, between two worlds. Mason sat beside the dying fire of his beach kitchen, turning the glowing pearl in his hand. The ocean lapped gently at his boots like it was listening. He hadn't slept. His mind kept replaying the night before. The soldiers, the threat, and the sea that had stood up for him. Ricktal approached, his armor dented and wet with sea spray. They want you to face the High Council, he said quietly. Corvan calls you dangerous. Mason smiled faintly. He's not wrong. Ricktal hesitated. You could run. The sea would hide you. Mason looked at the children playing near the shore. And leave them behind? No. If the sea gave me a voice, I'll use it. Before noon, the council from the fleet descended. 5 alien leaders in silver robes, faces marked with symbols of power. They stood on the beach like they were above everyone, their boots untouched by sand. The whole camp gathered to watch. Corvan stepped forward, his voice booming. You, human Mason, are accused of violating sacred law, consorting with forbidden life, and spreading heresy among imperial citizens. How do you plead? Mason looked at the ocean, then back at them. Guilty of feeding the hungry. A murmur rippled through the crowd. One counselor sneered. You mock our law? No, Mason said calmly. But maybe your laws forgot mercy. The counselor raised a glowing staff. Then you'll be erased from this world. Before he could finish, the ground trembled. The ocean began to rise again, not in anger but in radiance. The waves parted, and out of the water came dozens of glowing creatures, each carrying shells filled with food, fish, fruits, crystals, and light itself. Gasps filled the air. The creatures laid the food gently on the beach, forming a long line, a table made of sea and sand. Mason stepped forward, his voice strong but kind. You see, the ocean doesn't belong to humans or aliens. It belongs to anyone who respects it. It gives when you give back. The council stared, speechless. Even Corvan lowered his weapon, uncertain. The creatures turned their glowing eyes toward the aliens, waiting. Mason knelt beside the first shell, picked up a piece of glowing fruit and held it out. Eat, he said softly. It's not poison. It's peace. No one moved, until one of the alien children, the same brave girl, walked forward again. She took the fruit, smiled at Mason and bit into it. The light spread across her skin, soft and beautiful. The soldiers gasped. Rictal smiled, tears in his eyes. Look, she's alive. She's more than alive. Mason looked at the council. You can keep fighting fear, or you can eat with us and start again. The waves glowed brighter, reflecting in the eyes of every soldier. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Then, the unthinkable happened. General Corvan stepped forward. He removed his helmet and knelt in the sand beside Mason. I was wrong, he said quietly. The sea judged me, and it was right too. He took a piece of glowing fruit and ate it. The light spread across his armor, turning the black metal silver blue. He looked up, awe in his eyes. It forgave us. Mason smiled. It never hated you. It just waited for you to listen. Soon the entire camp and the soldiers from the fleet gathered around the glowing shells. They shared food, laughter, stories, and tears. The beach became a place of peace, a feast that no one had planned, but everyone needed. Above them, the ships powered down completely. The Empire's banners shimmered in the reflected ocean light, no longer symbols of control, but of unity. Rictal raised his voice. From this day, he said proudly, this beach belongs to no empire. It belongs to all who seek life. The crowd cheered, their voices rising like waves. Mason looked at the sea, the glow soft against his face. He whispered, Thank you. And deep beneath the surface, the voice of the ocean answered one last time, calm and warm. Thank you, Tide Speaker. You remembered what the stars forgot, that peace is the greatest meal of all. The tide rose gently, touching everyone's feet, as if blessing the new bond between worlds. That night, under twin moons, aliens and humans feasted together, a banquet of unity that would echo through galaxies. Years passed, the Sea of Aethra was no longer called cursed. Where once stood a starving camp, there now stood a bright settlement, glowing lights, laughter, trade, and peace. Ships came from distant worlds not to conquer, but to learn. And at the heart of it all, beside the soft blue ocean, stood a small wooden place with a rusted sign that read, The Tide's Gift. Inside, the air always smelled of firewood, salt, and warmth. A simple kitchen, one table, one man, and an ocean that never stopped watching him. Captain Mason had grown older, his hair streaked with silver, but his eyes still carried that same calm fire. Every morning, he cooked breakfast for whoever came first. Aliens, humans, hybrids, travelers. He never asked for payment. The only rule he kept was written above the counter in plain words, eat with peace or don't eat at all. One evening, a group of alien students entered the small restaurant. They were young and curious, dressed in white travel robes, their skin glowing faintly like pearls from generations of living near the sea. Are you the Mason? One of them asked, his voice trembling with awe. Mason smiled gently as he stirred a pot of glowing stew. That depends, he said softly. Do the stories say I have 2 hands and a face full of wrinkles? The students laughed nervously. The stories say you spoke to the ocean, said another. That you made it rise to protect us. That you cooked a storm into calm. Mason nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting the firelight. The sea listens, yes. But it listens to everyone, if you speak with kindness. He handed each of them a bowl. The students hesitated. The food glowed faintly blue. One whispered, Is this from the sea? Yes, Mason said. Everything living is. They tasted it and smiled instantly. It's warm, one said. It feels like home, Mason chuckled. That's because it is home. When night came, the students stayed by the fire, listening to the waves outside. Juan asked quietly, "Why did the sea choose you, Mason?" He looked out the open door where the moonlight touched the water. "It didn't choose me," he said. "It chose all of us. I just listened first." He leaned back, remembering the faces of those long gone, Riktal Korvan, the brave little girl who had once dared to eat the forbidden fish. He remembered the first storm, the fear, the faith, the feast. "The ocean doesn't speak in words," he said. "It speaks in hunger, in kindness, in how we treat each other when the world gives us nothing." "I only gave what I had, hope and food." The youngest student frowned. "And that was enough?" Mason smiled. "It always is." The wind outside shifted. The sea glowed brighter, like it was calling again. Mason stood and walked to the edge of the shore. The students followed quietly. The night was still, and the ocean reflected the stars, as if the sky had fallen into it. Then from the deep came the faint hum, the same sound he had heard years ago. The waves rose slightly, gentle, soft. A voice echoed. "Ancient, peaceful, familiar, you have kept your promise, Tide Speaker." "The sea remembers," Mason smiled. "And I remember you." The students stared in awe as faint lights swirled beneath the surface, hundreds of glowing shapes, the same sea spirits that once rose in fury. Now they danced, the voice whispered again, fading into the wind. "Go, human, rest. The tide will carry your story now." A tear slipped down Mason's cheek, but he was smiling. "Then let it carry peace too." He stepped back toward his small kitchen, the sand glowing softly under his feet. The students followed, silent, hearts full. The waves sang quietly behind them. That night, the lights of the tide's gift stayed on longer than usual. Inside, the last bowl was left on the table, steaming untouched, waiting for whoever came next. By dawn, Mason was gone. Only his apron and the glowing pearl remained, resting where the fire once burned. The sea outside shimmered gently, calm, alive, eternal. And so began the legend told across worlds of a human who cooked peace, who spoke to the sea, who fed the hungry and taught empires that life itself could be shared. They called him the Tide Speaker. And in every port, every ocean world, travelers still whisper the same words before they eat. For the hungry, for the living, for the sea,